if Yala, can keep doing well with her tennis, who knows? The sky's the limit on the court, off the court.
Is she the biggest draw in women's tennis right now in the world?
And then we have a big challenger.
The Linz Open draw dropped this week. Yala's name confirmed for April 6th. And within hours, a tennis expert had already seen enough to go off. Not after the chaos, before it. Because Melbourne already wrote this script in January. Yala's 2 million Filipino army shut down the Australian Open's court 6, under 1,500 seats, with queues stretching toward Rod Laver Arena and hundreds physically turned away before the first point.
I mean, you get nervous here and there when it's going, I don't want to say easy, but when the score is in your favor, it's like you have to be cautious, so a little bit nervous, but obviously I'm super happy to be here in quarters.
Coco Gauff called Yala the player who would outsell every name on tour in jerseys. The WTA built the Philippines its first professional tournament, a final sold out before she confirmed entry. Indian Wells practice sessions drew crowds, and journalists compared them directly to Alcaraz. Dubai's quarterfinal run, every match, gone. Now the expert has looked at Lintz Open's 2,500-seat design center against documented demand at this scale and called it what it is, functionally a 1,000-seat court. Same pattern, different country, zero. Excuse for the same mistake. Subscribe. This channel catches these things before they happen. Here's the full argument. The argument starts with a single question the expert put to anyone willing to engage. At what point does a tournament's failure to prepare become a deliberate choice? Melbourne was forgivable as a first-time miscalculation. You can look at January's Australian Open chaos and conclude that no scheduling committee genuinely anticipated what Yala's fanbase would generate on match day. The queues, the turned-away fans, the crowds watching on outdoor screens. Organizers could credibly claim they were caught off guard. That excuse has now expired. Every tournament since Melbourne has been handed the same evidence in real time, and Linz Open is walking into April 6th with a 2,500-seat venue against a documented demand that shut down a significantly larger Australian Open court just 10 weeks ago. That is the core of the expert's position. Not outrage, not hyperbole, just a straight-line observation that the information needed to make a better decision has been publicly available for months, and Lintz has chosen to proceed as though it doesn't exist. To understand why this criticism lands, the Melbourne situation needs its full context. Court 6 at the Australian Open is not a throwaway outer court. It seats just under 1,500 spectators and is considered a mid-tier venue within Melbourne Park's infrastructure. For most players at Yala's ranking at the time, world number 49, Court 6 is a reasonable assignment. The scheduling committee looked at a player ranked outside the top 40, making her first Australian Open main draw appearance, and made what they assumed was a proportionate call. What they failed to calculate was the Filipino diaspora. There are over 10 million Filipinos living outside the Philippines, and Melbourne has one of the most concentrated Filipino communities in the Southern Hemisphere. When Yala's name appeared in the draw, the word went out through every WhatsApp group, Facebook page, and community network that exists in that city. Fans arrived hours before match time. The queue stretched back toward Rod Laver Arena, the main stadium, before a single ball was struck. Hundreds were physically turned away at the entrance. Those who couldn't get in watched on outdoor big screens, creating a viewing atmosphere outside the court that rivaled what was happening inside it. Journalist Jose Morgado watched the situation unfold and wrote, without qualification, "Putting Yala on court 6 is just dumb." That's a direct quote from a working tennis journalist, not a social media comment, not a fan complaint. A credentialed media professional looked at the evidence and called the scheduling decision exactly what it was. Novak Djokovic was more diplomatic, but his framing was still a concession. He acknowledged that scheduling Yala on a bigger court would have been the correct call while describing the overflow as a good problem to have. When a 24-time Grand Slam champion is using diplomatic language to essentially agree that something went wrong, the scheduling committee doesn't get to claim vindication. Former Philippine national team coach Carl Santamaria was watching from inside the stadium, seated among Filipino fans. His assessment was unambiguous. The crowd that showed up for Yala could have filled Manila's KIA Arena. a 5,000-seat indoor venue, and possibly exceeded it. Eala's own aunt, who had traveled from Melbourne's Filipino community specifically for the match, couldn't get in. Eala's opponent, Alicia Parks, admitted after the match that she was rattled by the atmosphere in the first set, describing an environment that resembled football rather than tennis. Parks lost that first set 0-6 before recovering. Her own words confirm that the crowd conditions created by an underseated venue directly affected the competitive outcome of the match. That matters beyond logistics. The venue decision influenced play on court. If Melbourne were an isolated incident, the Lintz criticism would carry less weight. But the months between January and April 2026 have produced a continuous stream of evidence that Eala's draw is categorically different from any other unseeded player in women's tennis. Dubai came in February. Yala entered the Dubai Tennis Championships and proceeded to sell out every match she played throughout a quarterfinal run. Not just the later rounds, every match. A tournament that had hosted elite players for years suddenly found its stadium consistently full, driven entirely by Filipino fans based in the UAE, where approximately 1 million overseas Filipino workers are currently based. Coco Gauff played Yala in the Dubai quarterfinals and remarked afterward that seeing the stadium at full capacity in a tournament she'd attended for years was genuinely meaningful. That's a top 5 player acknowledging that someone ranked outside the top 30 was doing something to tournament attendance she hadn't seen before. Indian Wells arrived in March. Yala's practice sessions at the BNP Paribas Open drew crowds that journalists specifically compared to those following Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner, and Venus Williams. Not comparable to other WTA players, comparable to the top draws in men's tennis and one of the most iconic names the sport has ever produced, the BNP Paribas. Open tournament executive Philippe Doré said directly, "We love every minute of it. We benefit from it. We promote it." The tournament posted a day-in-the-life video featuring Eala that accumulated 94,000 YouTube views, the most watched content of their entire 2026 tournament by a significant margin. Gauff herself, asked which player would top jersey sales if tennis adopted that model, gave a one-name answer, Alex Eala. She added that Yala probably would be number 1. World number 17. Iva Jovic, one of Yala's closest friends on tour, was asked the same question and gave the same answer without hesitation. "So many Filipinos show up, I love it, I think it's great." This is not speculative fanbase analysis. This is the top players on the WTA Tour independently confirming that Eala's support operates on a scale different from everything around her. The WTA itself confirmed it by creating the Philippine Women's Open, a brand new 125-level tournament built specifically because Eala's rise made it commercially viable. The final sold out before she confirmed participation. Tickets were gone for a match she hadn't yet agreed to play. The Design Center Lintz is a legitimate professional venue. Since the tournament returned there in 2023, it has hosted WTA 500-level tennis with a main show court adapted from a configurable indoor exhibition hall, seating approximately 2,500 spectators. Past champions at this venue include names like Coco Gauff, Aryna Sabalenka, and Jelena Ostapenko. It's a quality facility by WTA 500 standards. The problem isn't the venue relative to WTA 500 norms. The problem is that Yala doesn't operate within WTA 500 norms when it comes to crowd demand. Linz is in Austria, a country with no significant Filipino community infrastructure. The fans who will travel for Yala at this tournament will be largely Filipinos based in Germany, Switzerland, and other parts of Central Europe, a diaspora that is smaller in absolute numbers than Melbourne or Dubai, but demonstrably motivated enough to travel across borders for a first-round match. The same fans who flew from Manila to Melbourne for a round 1 fixture against a player ranked 99th in the world will not be deterred by a flight from Munich to Linz. Against documented demand at this scale, 2,500 seats function, as the expert framed it, as a 1,000-seat court. Demand doesn't scale with venue size. When a fan base is mobilized, a 2,500-seat venue fills the same way a 1,500-seat venue fills, which means the overspill, the turned-away fans, and the external chaos happen at roughly the same threshold. The number on the capacity sign means very little when the incoming demand is measured in the tens of thousands of people globally, tracking where she plays next. The expert's specific frustration is that this isn't a projection. It's a pattern that has repeated itself with enough consistency across enough different countries and venues that continuing to treat it as unpredictable is intellectually dishonest. Melbourne, Dubai, Indian Wells, Manila, 4 consecutive environments where the same dynamic played out. Lintz now has 4 data points to work with heading into April 6th, and the draw still confirmed her entry without any publicly stated accommodation for the demand she generates. There's a separate layer to this situation that makes the venue issue more consequential than it would be for a player. Cruising through a comfortable part of her season, Yala arrives at Linz carrying a ranking problem. After her 4th-round exit at the 2026 Miami Open, a 0-6, 2-6 loss to Karolina Muchova, Yala is set to drop from world number 29 to approximately 45th, losing 270 ranking points she had accumulated from last year's Miami semifinal run that she couldn't defend. This is her first clay court tournament of 2026, a surface she openly acknowledged still requires significant development. Her 2025 clay record across 4 tournaments was 2 wins and 4 losses. She exited in the first round at both the Italian Open and the French Open last year. Linz is therefore not a comfortable warm-up event, it's a ranking rescue mission. According to calculations already published by multiple outlets, Yala needs at minimum a semi-final finish at Linz to have any realistic chance of re-entering the top 30 before Madrid. A quarterfinal exit would leave her in the 34th to 36th ranking range, likely insufficient for seeding at the Madrid Open, her next scheduled stop from April 21st onwards. She's entering unseeded, facing a draw that includes defending champion Ekaterina Alexandrova at number 11, Clara Tauson at number 17, Ludmila Samsonova at number 19, and Emma Raducanu alongside Jelena Ostapenko. For a player whose clay court game Brad Gilbert recently identified as requiring dramatic improvement, specifically around her serve percentage and first serve points won, this is a genuinely difficult week on a surface she hasn't mastered yet. The question the expert is raising is whether Yala should be competing with any avoidable external pressure piled on top of an already challenging competitive situation. Melbourne demonstrated that an undersized venue creates a noise environment that disrupts the match itself. Parks said so directly. If Linz repeats that scenario in an event where Yala genuinely needs results, the venue decision stops being a logistical inconvenience and starts being something that affects a 20-year-old's professional career at a critical moment in her development. Yala herself, speaking after Miami, said she was genuinely excited about the clay season despite acknowledging it as her weakest surface. She added, "I could win the whole thing or lose the first match. If I don't get the win here, I'll get it somewhere else." That's the competitive mindset of someone who has internalized pressure well. What she shouldn't have to internalize is the administrative failure of a tournament that had 3 months' notice and 4 documented precedents to work with. Andy Roddick called the Yala effect the type of story you cheer for because it's great for tennis. That's accurate, and the sentiment is genuine. But cheering for a story while allowing the infrastructure around it to remain inadequate is a comfortable position that doesn't actually serve the player at its center. Every tournament that benefits commercially from Yala's draw, and they all do, from increased ticket demand to viral content reaching audiences tennis hasn't historically accessed, has a corresponding obligation to ensure her competitive environment is properly managed. The expert's point, stripped down to its essential form, is this: Lintz Open is about to receive a level of fan demand it was not designed for. It has been given every piece of information required to prepare for that demand, and the current arrangement suggests it hasn't treated that information as a priority. When the queues form outside the design center on April 6th, the surprise will not be genuine. It will be a choice made in advance, dressed up as an oversight after the fact. That is worth saying before it happens rather than after, because after Melbourne, after Dubai, after Indian Wells, and after a WTA tournament in Manila sold out its final before the headliner confirmed attendance, "we didn't know" is no longer a sentence anyone in professional tennis scheduling gets to finish. That's the full argument. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether you think Lintz is genuinely unprepared or whether the expert is overstating the case. If this kind of coverage before the headlines form is what you're here for, subscribe and hit the notification bell so the next one reaches you the moment it goes up. See you on the other side of April 6th.